Black Belt asked the janitor to fight as a joke. What she did next made the whole gym stand shocked. When Jake Mercer, a confident black belt and local gym legend, spotted Riley, the quiet janitor who always kept to herself, he saw an easy target for a joke. He never imagined that challenging her to fight would turn into the most unforgettable moment in the gym's history. What began as a careless laugh quickly unraveled into a powerful lesson about strength, resilience, and the dangers of underestimating someone based on their role or silence. In just a few minutes, Riley, a young woman carrying a hidden legacy, would shatter assumptions, command respect, and change the way everyone saw her forever. And before I forget, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. And if you're new here, consider subscribing to our channel so you don't miss tomorrow's special video. I guarantee you won't want to miss it. The floors of Hollow Creek Combat Gym glistened faintly under the pale fluorescent lights, not because of prestige or pride, but because someone quietly made it so. She moved between the mats with practiced stillness, careful not to disturb the fighters going through drills or sparring rounds. The mop glided like a blade. No wasted motion, no sound. Most never even noticed her. Just another part of the gym's humdrum background, like the wall fans or worn-out punching bags. Her name tag read, Riley, no last name. Just that. Early 20s. Dark hair pulled into a tight bun. Baggy hoodie, gray cargo pants, old sneakers. Janitor. Maybe maintenance. Some said she was new. Others weren't sure if she'd been here a week or a year. She never answered questions. A few regulars nodded politely as she passed, but most barely acknowledged her. Especially not the ones in the front mats, the showmen, as the old-timers called them. Today, the air was thick with the smell of sweat, tape, and competition. A regional tournament was coming, and tension rippled beneath every roundhouse, every grunt, every barked instruction. And then, Jake Marsden stepped onto the mat. 6'2", dojo royalty in the area. A black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, 3rd degree. Loud, flashy. The kind who announced every entrance with a smirk and a joke, then backed it up with brutal precision. He wore his GI like armor, sleeves rolled tight. The room always shifted when Jake walked in. People stood straighter, talked louder, or quieter, depending on where they stood on his pyramid. Riley had just finished scrubbing the edge of the mat when Jake noticed her. He tilted his head. Yo, mop girl. She didn't react. A few heads turned. Jake kept going. You clean up better than some of the white belts I've seen. What do you say? Want to try a round? Snickers from the benches. One of his students laughed too loud. Another whispered, Bro, don't. Jake raised his hands in mock defense. Come on, just for fun. I promise not to mess up your bucket. Riley stood still, mop in one hand, eyes lowered. But her posture, it was subtle. Feet planted slightly wide. Centered. Jake took a step closer. Unless you're scared. Someone laughed again. The kind of laugh that seeks permission in cruelty. And then, she looked up. Just for a second. Her eyes met his. Calm. Still. Not angry. Not embarrassed. And not scared. Jake faltered, barely, but covered it with bravado. Didn't mean to interrupt janitorial justice. I just figured you were watching for tips. Riley set the mop aside. Not with drama. No music swelled. No eyes widened in shock. She just unzipped her hoodie, and underneath was a plain dark gray athletic shirt. Long sleeves rolled up just enough to reveal forearms marked with faint scars, old ones, carefully healed. One bore a small black ink triangle, half faded. Nobody recognized it. Not yet. But they would. Jake raised a brow. Wait, you serious? Riley tilted her head once. The gym fell quiet. Jake smiled. All right, let's dance. And in that silence, as Riley stepped barefoot onto the mat, one of the older veterans by the bench, a man with a limp and 1,000-yard eyes, slowly stood up, arms crossed. He didn't blink. He just whispered under his breath. She's not here to dance. The mat beneath Riley's feet was familiar. Not this particular one, with its cracked vinyl and faded logo, but the feeling of it, of standing across from someone taller, louder, assured of victory. Jake paced a little, rolling his neck like a predator warming up for a show. The room had gone from amused to curious. The laughter had died down, but not the arrogance. Most thought she'd back out. The janitor versus the champ? No contest. Jake nodded toward the coach in the corner. You want to ref this or call a medic? Riley said nothing. She just moved to the center of the mat. She didn't bounce or fidget. She breathed. Low. Measured. Rhythmic. Jake raised his fists. You ever fought before, mop girl? Still no answer. He snorted. Guess I'll find out. A student hit the bell. Jake surged forward fast, dropping his stance low and sweeping in with a quick leg grab. Fast enough to drop most beginners in seconds. But Riley, she didn't react like a beginner. Her foot pivoted at the perfect angle. Her hips rotated, spine aligned, and she stepped just enough off-axis that Jake's arm caught nothing but air. It wasn't flashy. It was surgical. The old veteran in the back tilted his head slightly. That pivot, that wasn't gym learned. Jake recovered quickly, face tightening, and went again. More aggressive this time. Left jab, then right hook, controlling space. Riley didn't counter. She moved. Not backward. Not flinching. She absorbed the shape of the fight. Adjusted the distance. Reacted without reacting. Jake threw a quick front kick, and just as his foot committed, she stepped inside the arc and tapped his shoulder with an open palm, redirecting his entire center of gravity. It looked accidental. It wasn't. Jake stumbled back. The room held its breath. Some of the students started whispering. A few pulled out phones. Still, Riley said nothing. No pose. No flex. Just stillness. Jake's face shifted. It wasn't a smile anymore. Not anger yet, but awareness. That creeping uncertainty when someone realizes the script isn't playing out the way it's supposed to. He charged again. This time harder. A real attempt. He went for a clinch, trying to dominate through strength, but Riley dropped lower, her left hand coiling under his elbow. With a twist of the wrist and a sudden step through, she unbalanced his entire posture. And Jake fell. Flat. A dull, echoing thud. The gym gasped. Phones now fully recording. Someone muttered. What the hell was that? The old vet didn't move. His eyes narrowed. That move, the entry, the joint angle, wasn't taught in this gym. It wasn't even part of standard jiu-jitsu. That was Hagana, Israeli close combat, real-world tactical training. Jake pushed himself up, humiliated. Okay, he muttered, brushing off his GI. Lucky grab. But Riley just stepped back, giving him room. No mockery. No satisfaction. Just space, like she was waiting for him to catch up. The coach on the side narrowed his eyes. He'd trained fighters for 20 years. He had never seen a janitor move like that. Jake stood up slower this time. Not because he was hurt. Not yet. But because something in him had shifted. His swagger dimmed. His eyes scanned Riley not like a janitor anymore, but like a puzzle. Across the mat, she waited. Arms at her side. Her stance was open. No guard. No aggression. Just calm. And that calm was louder than words. Jake circled her again, less showy now. He feinted left. She didn't flinch. He twitched a kick. She didn't move. It was like trying to fight fog, the kind that hides cliffs. He lunged again, this time with full weight, fists aiming high, then spinning low for a sweep. But Riley, she was already gone. Not literally, just absent from where she was supposed to be. Her body turned, knee bent, and with a pivot smoother than gravity itself, she redirected his entire force sideways. He stumbled, caught his balance, and spun back, breathing hard. Now the gym was silent. The snickers were gone. All that remained was the soft hum of fluorescent lights, the distant sound of ropes creaking, and the invisible tension of 100 eyes realizing. This isn't a game anymore. From the back wall, the older vet finally sat down, his gaze unblinking. He reached into his coat and pulled out a small item, a worn, folded photo, and stared at it for a moment. In the corner of the picture was a young girl in dusty combat fatigues, no more than 10 years old, standing beside a tall man in military gear. His face was grim. Hers, unreadable. The vet whispered, "No way." He folded the photo slowly and looked back at the mat. Meanwhile, Jake adjusted his belt. The mood had changed, but he refused to show it. "Okay," he said, forcing a grin. "You got some moves. Where'd you learn that?" "YouTube." Riley didn't answer. Instead, She slowly slid her right sleeve up just enough to reveal a strip of worn medical tape, wrapped tight around her forearm. Faded ink peeked out from beneath it, not decorative, not pretty. It looked like numbers. Coordinates, maybe. Military stamped. The coach at the edge of the mat narrowed his eyes, stepped forward, then stopped himself. His brow furrowed. Recognition flickered, like something long forgotten trying to surface. Jake glanced at the numbers and shrugged. What, a barcode? The coach suddenly turned to one of his assistants. Give me the guest log from last week. Now. The assistant blinked. Why? Just do it. Back on the mat, Jake tried again, this time slower. He approached like he would a real opponent, not a joke. His hands came up. He used real footwork. Riley didn't mirror him. She responded, with a weight shift, a breath adjustment, a subtle lean. She wasn't reacting to Jake. She was reading him, anticipating, like she'd done this 1,000 times, just not here. Not in places with mats and rules and an audience, but maybe somewhere with sand, or steel, or screams. Jake tried a chokehold. Riley countered with one movement. One. No struggle. No hesitation. And Jake was on the ground again, his breath knocked out. Silence fell. And then the coach finally spoke, soft but urgent. That's not a janitor. Jake sat up on his elbows, eyes wide, chest rising too fast for someone who used to brag he never broke a sweat. No one laughed now. No one even blinked. A hush spread through Hollow Creek Combat Gym like smoke after a shot. Invisible, but thick with meaning. Something had shifted, and everyone felt it, even if they didn't know why yet. Riley didn't gloat. She stepped back quietly, hands still loose at her sides. The tape on her forearm had unraveled slightly during the takedown, revealing a string of numbers, and beneath it, a barely visible inked spearhead symbol. Those who recognized it didn't speak. Most didn't, but the coach did. He turned sharply toward the assistant jogging back, guest log in hand. Let me see. Pages flipped, pen scratched, and then, there it was. Riley Kinross. Signed in 6 days ago. No listed rank. No gym ID. No prior history. But next to her name, in pencil, almost rubbed out, someone had written, Rhett. Deep Spectre. The coach froze. That name wasn't supposed to exist on paper. He muttered, no. They disbanded that group. Years ago. Who? Asked the assistant. He didn't answer. On the mat, Jake stood again, breathing hard now. His voice had lost its edge. Okay, he said, half smiling. Guess you've done this before. Still no answer. She just waited. Jake scratched the back of his head. You some kind of cop or something? Still nothing. His humor was cracking. And that was when one of the older students, a quiet guy named Devin, ex-Navy, slowly stood up from the benches. I've seen that symbol before, he said. Not loud. Not dramatic. Just enough for the silence to catch it. All eyes turned to him. He walked toward the mat, cautiously, like approaching something sacred. Back when I was stationed near Kandahar, there was a guy, Delta Force, who told us stories. Said there was a woman who cleared an entire compound during a hostage raid. No footage. No records. Just aftermath. Devin pointed at the symbol on Riley's arm. That's what he drew in the dirt. Jake's smirk died completely. The coach turned to Devin. You're sure? I'd bet my pension. Jake opened his mouth, maybe to argue, maybe to joke, but the words never came. Because now, standing this close, he saw her clearly. The way her shoulders were aligned, just slightly off-center. Not casual, but prepared. The fine scars along her fingers, not from training, but from actual damage, healed over time. The way she didn't blink when stared at. And behind her, in the doorway, stood a man no one had noticed until now. Worn ball cap, thick boots, quiet presence. He leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. Watching. No one knew him. But Riley did. Her eyes flicked toward him once, then away. The man gave a single nod. And left. Jake took a deep breath. You're not just a janitor. Riley finally spoke. 2 words. Never was. Jake lowered his hands, slowly. This wasn't about winning anymore. He just wanted to understand what, or who, he was standing in front of. Across the gym, a few phones had been discreetly turned off. Nobody wanted to be the one who filmed something they weren't supposed to. Some instinct, buried deep, said, You're in the presence of something classified, something earned. The coach stepped toward the edge of the mat. His voice came low, level. You said her name was Riley Kinross? The assistant nodded, still holding the guest log. The coach exhaled through his nose. She's not on any official list. But there's a guy I knew in Langley. Used to talk about a program. Off books, off the record. They trained a handful of operators after Operation Iron Drift fell apart. One of them was a legacy candidate. Jake blinked. Legacy. Daughter of a field legend. Shadow team. They called him Lynx. Disappeared 15 years ago after Beirut. Riley didn't confirm. She didn't need to. The old veteran in the back slowly reached into his coat again and pulled out the photo once more. He stared at the girl on the corner. That same quiet presence. That same expression. He whispered, more to himself than anyone else. She's his kid. Nobody moved. The gym wasn't a gym anymore. It was a vault. A place holding something valuable and volatile. Jake wiped sweat from his forehead and gave a nervous laugh. So what? This whole time you've just been cleaning floors and watching us flail around. Riley finally looked at him, not unkindly, but with something deeper, something worn. No, she said. I've been trying to forget it. That landed harder than any punch. She wasn't there to show off. She wasn't there to correct or teach. She was hiding. And the janitor uniform? It wasn't a disguise. It was armor. I took this job, she continued quietly, because no one talks to the janitor. No one asks questions. I like that. Jake rubbed the back of his neck. Then why accept the challenge? Riley tilted her head slightly, like the answer was obvious. Because you mocked someone who didn't fight back. Jake said nothing. But from the benches, Devin, the Navy vet, nodded slowly. She's right. The weight of those words settled on the gym like dust. And then, behind them, a small beep. The coach's phone buzzed. A message popped up. He read it once. Then again. His eyes went sharp. He looked at Riley. You listed your emergency contact as a man named Samuel Knox? Riley didn't answer. The coach turned the screen to face her. I just got an alert from our background system. His profile triggered a red flag. Not flagged as criminal. He paused. Flagged as restricted military intelligence. Tier 1 black. A long silence. Then Riley said softly, he's not my emergency contact. Everyone turned. He's my handler. The air inside Hollow Creek Combat Gym turned dense. Not with fear, but with realization. The kind that lands behind the ribs and stays there. Jake stepped back instinctively. For all his bravado, he understood one thing now with absolute clarity. He never should have touched the mat. The coach swallowed hard. Handler. Riley nodded once, quietly. He checks in every 90 days. Make sure I'm still stable. She didn't say the rest. She didn't need to. But everyone in the room heard it anyway. Still not a threat. The gym was no longer a place for sport. It was a theater, and Riley stood at its center, not performing, but enduring. Holding her silence like a rifle, chambered but not fired. One of the younger fighters, a kid named Mateo, stepped forward, voice tentative. Wait, so you were in? Like special forces? She looked at him. Eyes soft. Worse. The room flinched. No smirk. No sarcasm. Just truth, flat as steel. Behind her, someone pulled out a tablet. Tapped in Samuel Knox. The screen froze. Access denied. Clearance restricted. The coach muttered, Jesus. And somewhere near the back, Devin, the Navy vet, whispered. Knox was part of Sentinel Prime. Internal recovery team. Used when ops go south and everyone else is too afraid to pick up the phone. Jake looked between them all, suddenly very small. He swallowed. So why here? Why this gym? Why this town? Riley didn't answer right away. She looked toward the far wall where the mop still leaned quietly against the bucket. It seemed almost symbolic now, the weight of trying to clean a life that wouldn't scrub away. Then, softly, there was a little girl in Beirut, caught in the crossfire during one of our raids. We extracted her. She didn't speak for weeks, just drew in the sand. A long pause. I used to be that girl. No one moved. No one breathed. She stepped to the edge of the mat, picked up her hoodie, and slowly rolled down her sleeves. Her voice was lower now, barely above a whisper. When you've lived under shadows, sometimes Cleaning the floor is the only thing that feels honest. Jake didn't dare interrupt. Not anymore. Riley reached into her pocket and pulled out a small keychain. Attached to it was a rusted metal ring, maybe from a dog tag. Faded letters still visible. KNR 47. The coach blinked. Is that your father's? She didn't answer, just held it in her hand for a moment, like a tether to something lost, then slipped it back into her pocket. I didn't come here to fight, she said. I came here to remember who I was before. Before the handler. Before the name, Riley Ross, meant anything to anyone. Before the wars behind her eyes. The heavy silence that had settled over Hollow Creek Combat Gym now carried something new, an unspoken reverence, a palpable shift in energy that vibrated beneath the tired fluorescent lights. It was a moment of collective awakening, a recognition that this janitor wasn't just a shadow blending into the background, but someone who carried worlds beneath her calm exterior. Jake rubbed his jaw thoughtfully, eyes still fixed on Riley. The bravado he wore like armor had begun to crack, replaced by something rawer, more honest. Look, he said quietly, voice stripped of its earlier cockiness. I owe you an apology. For underestimating you. For treating this like a joke. She met his gaze steadily, a flicker of something warm and fragile surfacing in her eyes, an unspoken acceptance. She didn't say anything. Sometimes, words were unnecessary. Around them, the gym's usual hum of activity had completely stilled. Fighters and trainers alike sat frozen, their faces reflecting a mix of awe and newfound respect. It was as if they had just witnessed a sacred ritual, a peeling back of facades to reveal something pure and undeniable. The old veteran, the man who had watched silently from the back, shifted forward in his seat. His voice, weathered and soft, broke the silence like a gentle breeze through autumn leaves. We don't forget people like you, he said, voice filled with quiet conviction. Not here. Not ever. Devin, the Navy vet who had spoken before, nodded solemnly. This gym, he said, voice low but firm, is about discipline, respect, and honor. It's about more than punches and kicks. It's about who you are when no one's watching. His words rippled through the room, touching something deep in every person present. Some of the younger fighters sat up straighter, their eyes wide with a mix of wonder and humility. They saw Riley not as a janitor or an outsider, but as a living testament to resilience and quiet strength. A warrior who fought battles no one else could see. Riley's lips curled into a small, almost imperceptible smile. It was the first time anyone had seen her smile since she entered the gym. A fleeting, fragile thing, but beautiful all the same. It spoke of wounds healing, of hope cautiously rekindling after years of darkness. Jake exhaled slowly, the tension in his shoulders easing. If you want, we can help you train again, the coach offered, stepping forward with a calm authority. Not to fight for show or for trophies, but to find peace and control. To remember the discipline you already carry. Riley glanced toward the mop and bucket resting quietly in the corner, her daily companions. For a moment, her eyes softened, as if weighing the possibility of letting go, even just a little. Maybe, she said softly. The word was neither a promise nor a refusal, but a door left open. An invitation to something new. Jake extended his hand, not in challenge this time, but in respect. Riley looked at it for a heartbeat, then took it firmly, the gesture sealing an unspoken understanding between them. The gym, once filled with loud jeers and mockery, now hummed with a quiet energy, a renewed sense of purpose and connection. Fighters glanced at one another, nodding silently, as if pledging themselves to a new kind of camaraderie. As Riley bent to pick up the mop again, the symbol of her chosen invisibility, she paused. Then she turned to the gathered crowd, her voice steady but soft, carrying the weight of everything she'd lived through. Not everyone wears armor on the outside, she said, placing a hand gently over her heart. Some of us carry it here. The room held its breath, hanging on every word. And in that moment, Hollow Creek Combat Gym ceased to be just a place for fighting. It became a sanctuary, a place where quiet strength was honored, where the invisible battles were seen, and where respect was reclaimed without a single word of violence. The silence in Hollow Creek Combat Gym was almost sacred now, a heavy, deliberate stillness that seemed to stretch the very air. The usual clatter of gloves hitting bags, the sharp commands, the shifting feet, all had fallen away, leaving only a fragile space where truth could finally be spoken. For the first time since Riley stepped onto the mat, she was no longer invisible. Jake, the brash black belt who had once mocked her, stood rooted to the spot, eyes wide and searching. He looked for words, something to fill the vast, aching gap that had opened between his assumptions and the reality before him, but found none. It was humbling, this moment of reckoning. The coach stepped forward with slow, measured steps, his voice calm and respectful, carefully breaking the silence. "If you don't mind sharing," he said, "what was it like, living in the shadows, carrying all that weight no one sees?" Riley's gaze dropped to the worn mats beneath her feet. She breathed steadily, as though gathering strength from some deep, unspoken well. Then, with a quiet steadiness that held the room captive, she lifted her eyes to meet his. "You learn to become invisible," she began, voice low but clear. "Not because you want to, but because it's the only way to survive." Her words hung in the air like a whispered secret, fragile but potent. The gym held its breath. Every person in that room leaned in, drawn by the rawness of her confession. "In those years," she continued, "it wasn't about fighting for glory or medals. It was about making sure no one else had to pay the price for the mistakes of others." Her voice softened, as if recalling ghosts. "I lost people, friends I couldn't save, battles no one will ever know about." Her eyes darkened for a moment, shadows crossing her face. "There's a cost to silence. Sometimes, the hardest fight isn't against an opponent. It's the war inside yourself." She swallowed hard but didn't falter. "The battles behind closed doors, the memories that don't fade." Jake took an involuntary step closer, his respect deepening with every word. "How do you keep going?" he asked softly, no trace of mockery left. Riley's faint smile was almost a flicker of light in a long night. "You don't," she said honestly. "Not always. Some days, you want to give up, but you find reasons to get up again, to stand, to keep moving forward, even when the past tries to pull you under." The coach nodded slowly, his face etched with understanding. "That's discipline. That's true strength." From the back of the room, the old veteran rose with effort, leaning heavily on his cane. His voice, rough from years and silence, carried unwavering certainty. And that strength deserves honor. The tension that had coiled tight within the gym began to unravel. Skepticism gave way to admiration. Mockery faded into awe. Riley's gaze swept the crowd, faces that now saw her not as a janitor, but as a survivor, a warrior, a woman reclaiming her story in a place where stories were often buried. She folded her arms, a subtle shield and a quiet declaration of resolve. "I don't want pity," she said, voice steady and firm. "I don't want to be anyone's hero. I just want to be seen, to be understood, to exist without the weight of silence pressing me down." And in that simple, powerful declaration, the gym understood everything. The fight was no longer about physical dominance or public spectacle. It was about healing. For the first time, Hollow Creek Combat Gym was more than a place to fight. It was a sanctuary where broken pasts could find solace and quiet strength could be honored. A place where invisible battles were finally seen. The gym was still. The earlier energy of competition and casual chatter had been replaced by a quiet reverence. What began as a simple challenge, an offhand joke, had transformed into a profound moment of truth and recognition. The mat was no longer just a place for physical combat. It was a stage where history, sacrifice, and unspoken burdens converged. Jake's eyes flickered with a mixture of respect and disbelief as he looked toward the coach. "So, you're saying she's connected? Like family? A legacy?" The coach gave a slow, deliberate nod. "More than just connected. Riley Kinross is the daughter of Captain David Kinross, a legend in the special operations community. A man known for his precision, leadership, and relentless discipline. His name alone commands respect among those who understand what real sacrifice means. The name settled over the gym like a weighty presence. Even the younger fighters, many unaware of the intricacies of military lore, whispered among themselves, sensing the significance. Captain David Kinross was not just a name. He was a symbol, a myth wrapped in truth, a man who had vanished during a classified mission in Beirut 15 years ago, leaving behind questions, pain, and a legacy that no one truly dared touch. Riley's eyes fell to the worn mop handle she gripped, fingers tightening instinctively. The weight of the name hung heavily on her shoulders. "I never wanted to live in his shadow," she said softly, her voice barely more than a breath. "But the discipline, the drive, it's in my blood. From a young age, I trained not because I wanted to prove something to others, but because it was the only way I knew to survive." Jake swallowed hard, glancing at his own fists as if seeing them in a new light. "That explains a lot," he muttered, the bravado stripped away by the gravity of her words. The coach stepped closer, voice steady and serious. "And that's precisely why she's been avoiding the spotlight. That kind of legacy isn't just a badge of honor. It's a double-edged sword. People expect greatness, but they don't see the cost, the isolation, the pressure, the loss." Devin, the Navy vet, added softly, "I've met a few like her. Silent warriors who carry burdens no one can see. They don't seek attention. They just want to keep moving forward." Riley's voice dropped to a whisper, shadowed with pain and resolve. "There's more than pride in carrying that legacy. There's loss, friends, family, trust broken in ways no one understands. And secrets. Secrets that still haunt me." The gym absorbed the weight of her confession. It was a moment that transcended competition. It was about history, resilience, and the quiet courage to keep living despite everything. Jake stepped forward, sincerity softening his tone. "If you ever want to train for yourself, not to fight the past, but to find peace, this place is open. No judgments, no expectations." Riley glanced up, a quiet flicker of gratitude touching her eyes. "Maybe someday." The old veteran rose slowly, leaning on his cane. His voice was grave but approving. "You carry your father's spirit, but you've earned your own place here. That's not something everyone gets." The room remained still, a silent tribute to both the past that shaped her and the future she was quietly forging. For a brief moment, Hollow Creek Combat Gym became more than a battleground. It was a sanctuary, a place where legacy met humanity, where strength was measured not just by blows landed, but by the resilience to carry on. The atmosphere inside Hollow Creek Combat Gym had undergone a profound transformation. What had started as a moment of derision and careless laughter had blossomed into something far more significant, a shared moment of respect, understanding, and quiet acceptance. The gym was no longer just a place where fighters clashed and spectators cheered. It had become a sanctuary where stories of survival and strength were honored. Riley stood at the center, her posture calm and grounded. To anyone else, she might have seemed like just a young woman doing her job. But now, every eye in the room saw the weight she carried, the battle she fought, not with fists or kicks, but with resilience and unwavering will. The mop and bucket, once symbols of invisibility and neglect, now seemed to represent something different, a commitment to renewal, to cleaning away the past and starting anew. They were tools not just for tidying floors, but for reclaiming dignity. Jake approached her slowly, his earlier bravado softened by humility. His voice, when he spoke, was quiet but sincere. "If you're ready, I want to learn. Teach me what you know." Riley met his gaze with a small, genuine smile, a flicker of warmth breaking through the solemnity that had wrapped around her. "It's not about knowing," she replied softly. "It's about being willing to listen, to respect the fight, not just in the ring, but the fight inside yourself." The coach, standing nearby, nodded approvingly. "That's the heart of it," he said. "Discipline isn't just technique. It's mindset, purpose, and heart." From the benches, Devin and the other fighters exchanged glances, a silent understanding passing among them. Something in all of them had shifted, a realization that strength was layered, multifaceted. It wasn't just about landing punches or winning matches. It was about emotional resilience, humility, and honor. Riley took a deep breath, steady and deliberate. She stepped forward, setting the mop gently aside. The energy in the room seemed to shift again, charged with possibility and respect. The air was thick with quiet anticipation. "Let's start fresh," she said clearly, her voice steady but inviting. "No jokes, no underestimating, just respect." A murmur of agreement rippled through the room, a collective promise to honor what this moment had become. Jake smiled, an honest, unguarded smile, the kind that acknowledges the weight of the past and embraces hope for the future. "Ready when you are." The coach clapped his hands once, loud and purposeful. "All right, team, let's see what real discipline looks like." As the gym stirred back to life, the rhythm of training resumed, the soft thud of gloves against pads, the sharp breath of concentration, the subtle dance of movement and balance. Yet beneath the surface, something deeper had changed. The space was no longer just a battleground. It was a place for healing, for transformation. Riley's eyes drifted briefly toward the door, where the quiet man, her handler, had disappeared earlier. For the first time, a subtle light flickered in her expression, the possibility of moving forward, of healing, of reclaiming more than just her skills. The fight was no longer about proving herself to others. It was about reclaiming herself. And here, amidst the sweat, the echoes of footsteps, and the quiet hum of determination, she would begin again. As the gym settled back into its usual rhythm, a new energy permeated the space, one tinged with quiet respect and an undercurrent of curiosity. The fighters who had once seen Riley as merely the janitor now regarded her through a different lens, as someone bearing a story far deeper and stronger than any of them had imagined. Jake warmed up in the corner, no longer the brash challenger, but a man thinking deeply. His eyes often flicked toward Riley, watching her prepare for the first drill with a calmness that unsettled and intrigued him in equal measure. There was an unspoken power in her stillness, a tension held in reserve. Then, the gym door creaked open. Heads turned. In stepped a man whose presence immediately demanded attention. Tall and lean, with a quiet authority radiating from his posture, he wore a simple yet impeccably tailored jacket that set him apart from the casual gym crowd. The room seemed to pause, breath held. Riley's eyes met his briefly, a flicker of acknowledgement passing between them. The man nodded once, subtle, almost imperceptible, then moved quietly to take a seat near the back of the room. No one else in the gym seemed to know him, but his arrival shifted the atmosphere palpably. The coach approached cautiously, recognizing the man immediately. "Samuel Knox," the coach said quietly. Knox's gaze swept the room before settling again on Riley. "She's ready," he said simply, his voice low and steady. A ripple of whispered conversations started to spread among the gym-goers. Knox, the elusive handler tied to Riley's mysterious past, was here. His presence was a stark reminder that the world Riley had tried to leave behind wasn't so easy to escape. Jake's curiosity couldn't be contained. He moved closer, drawn by the need to understand. "Who is he?" he asked quietly. Devin, sitting on the bench, answered with a hint of reverence. "Knox is Sentinel Prime, one of the most discreet and feared operatives in the field. He handles the hardest recoveries and the deepest secrets. When things get dangerous or complicated, he's the one they call." Riley glanced once at Knox, then back at the group. "He's part of what I'm trying to move beyond," she said quietly. "But right now, I need to finish what I started." Knox nodded in approval. "You have the strength. Now you need the discipline." The coach turned toward Riley, voice steady. "Ready to begin?" Her reply was firm, unwavering. More than ever. The gym's energy shifted palpably as Riley stood centered on the mat, a quiet calm radiating from her like a beacon. The once noisy gym had settled into an almost reverent hush, every eye drawn to her, watching not just a fighter, but a woman who carried decades of unseen battles within. Samuel Knox's presence lingered like a shadow, a silent testament to the discipline Riley had cultivated, even as she moved through life in the background. His steady gaze was both a challenge and a reassurance. A reminder that the strength she wielded was born from relentless focus and sacrifice. Riley inhaled deeply, her breath slow and measured. The janitor's uniform and mop were gone, replaced by a posture that spoke of unspoken battles and hard-earned resilience. Here, stripped of pretense, she was simply herself, a force tempered by history. The coach's voice cut through the silence. Start with basics, footwork, and stance. With deliberate precision, Riley moved across the mat. Each step was calculated, controlled, the product of years spent mastering movement where every fraction of a second mattered. Her feet slid and pivoted effortlessly, tracing patterns honed through countless missions and trainings no outsider could imagine. Jake and the others watched, their skepticism melting away, replaced by awe and a newfound respect. They saw not just a fighter, but a disciplined warrior. Now shadowboxing. Fluid but deliberate, the coach instructed. Riley's hands rose smoothly, cutting the air with punches that were both graceful and deadly. There was no reckless aggression, only absolute control, each movement a precise conversation between body and mind. The silent rhythm of her strikes echoed the quiet power within her. Knox finally broke the silence, his voice low and deliberate. Discipline isn't muscle memory. It's control, control over your mind, your fear, your past. Riley's eyes flickered with memories. Battles fought long ago, ghosts still haunting her every step. She nodded slowly, acknowledging the weight those words carried. The coach called for rounds of sparring, but Riley paused, voice soft but firm. Not yet. Discipline must come before the fight. Jake absorbed the depth of her statement, feeling the true meaning behind it. This was no ordinary fight. It was a war waged within. Returning to her footwork, Riley moved with renewed focus. Every motion a meditation in strength and control. The gym seemed to hold its collective breath, witnessing a transformation, one not about defeating others, but mastering the self. The gym was electric with quiet anticipation. Every pair of eyes was fixed on Riley as she stood poised on the mat, her calm and deliberate movements having already claimed their respect. But now, the moment they had all been waiting for had arrived, the sparring match. Jake stepped forward, his stance transformed from cocky challenger to a man bearing genuine respect. The usual arrogance was gone, replaced by a measured calmness, his eyes searching Riley's not for weakness but for understanding. This wasn't about proving dominance anymore. It was about acknowledging strength. The coach gave a sharp, encouraging nod. Let's see what you've got. Riley didn't respond with words. Instead, she shifted smoothly into a stance that spoke volumes. Grounded and balanced, every muscle coiled yet controlled, a living testament to years of discipline, training, and hard-fought battles. She was ready. The first exchange was a study in contrast and grace. Jake launched a quick jab, sharp and confident, but Riley slipped it with effortless fluidity, a movement so natural, it was like watching water flow seamlessly around a rock in a river. Her dodge wasn't just evasive. It was a subtle message of mastery and control. The gym watched, silent but charged, as the pace steadily quickened. Riley's strikes were measured, precise, never wild or reckless. Each punch, each movement was a carefully crafted sentence in a silent story told through motion. She didn't need to overwhelm Jake. She only needed to control the rhythm of the fight, dictate its flow. Jake tried a rapid combination, fast, furious, hoping to break her defense. But Riley's counter was flawless, a subtle redirection of energy that left him momentarily off balance without landing a harsh blow. It was a lesson in efficiency, in harnessing power with grace. A murmur rose from the crowd, growing into whispers of disbelief and awe. The janitor, the quiet woman who had been invisible, was rewriting the story of strength before their eyes. Sweat dripped down Riley's brow, but her expression remained calm, almost serene. This was no longer about winning or losing. This was a declaration of resilience, of presence, and of respect. After a particularly fluid exchange, Riley stepped back, breathing steady and measured. Her eyes locked with Jake's, and she raised a single finger, one. It was not a taunt, but a signal. One round, one moment, one chance to truly understand. Jake nodded slowly, wiping sweat from his brow. I get it. The coach smiled quietly, pride evident in his eyes. That's discipline. That's respect. The gym, once filled with mockery, now buzzed with admiration and a renewed sense of humility. Riley wasn't just fighting. She was teaching a lesson far beyond punches and kicks. The energy in Hollow Creek Combat Gym had transformed completely. What had begun as a challenge laced with mockery was now something far deeper. A collective recognition of strength, resilience, and unspoken sacrifice. The fighters who had once seen Riley as just a janitor now regarded her with a newfound respect that transcended titles and assumptions. Jake lowered his hands slowly, the fire in his eyes replaced by a steady glow of sincerity. He stepped closer, voice low and honest. I misjudged you, he said, almost as if confessing a personal failing. You're not just some janitor. You're a fighter, a real one. Riley met his gaze, her own expression softening, the armor she had worn for so long gently cracking. I don't fight for recognition, she replied quietly, her voice steady but layered with meaning. I fight to honor those who couldn't, the ones who gave everything and never got a chance to be seen. Her words hung heavily in the air, drawing in every breath, every eye. The room seemed to lean in, as if collectively carrying the weight of her truth. The coach stepped forward, his tone calm and resolute, lending strength to her confession. You've earned your place here, he said firmly, not because of your title or your job, but because of who you are when it counts, when the stakes are highest. From the back of the gym, the old veteran stood slowly, leaning on his cane, and met Riley's eyes with a look of quiet approval. Respect isn't something handed out lightly, he said with gravity. It's earned through grit, sacrifice, and honor. A reverent silence followed. Then a muted but heartfelt round of applause began to ripple through the gym. It was not the noisy cheer of victory, but a solemn acknowledgement, a tribute to a moment both rare and profound. Jake extended his hand toward Riley, a gesture of genuine camaraderie and acceptance. If you ever want to train with us, you've got a team here, he said, his voice warm and welcoming. Riley hesitated just for a moment before shaking his hand. A faint, genuine smile touched her lips for the first time in what felt like forever. Maybe I will, she replied softly. The tension that had once filled the room gave way to something far warmer, a sense of belonging, hope, and the shared understanding that respect is deeper than appearances or rank. As Riley gathered her things and prepared to leave, the heavy burden of years seemed to lift, if only slightly. For the first time in a long while, she felt truly seen. Not as a shadow, not as a background figure, but as a woman who had fought, survived, and reclaimed her dignity. The janitor was no longer invisible. The atmosphere inside Hollow Creek Combat Gym had softened, shifting from the earlier tension and disbelief into a current of respect and quiet camaraderie. Riley moved with deliberate grace, gathering her belongings slowly. The mop handle, once her symbol of invisibility and routine, now rested against the wall, an emblem marking the end of one chapter, but also a reminder of how far she had come. Jake and the other fighters watched her with faces softened by admiration, a newfound understanding flickering in their eyes. No longer was she just the janitor, the background figure they had overlooked. Now, she was something much more, a survivor, a woman who carried stories and scars that stretched far beyond the gym walls and the fleeting moments on the mat. The coach approached her, his expression gentle yet sincere. You're welcome here anytime, he said quietly, the words carrying the weight of an unspoken promise. Riley's lips curved into a small, genuine smile, the gratitude softening the lines on her face. Thank you, she replied, her voice steady but filled with meaning. Without another word, she turned toward the exit. The gym seemed to hold its collective breath as she moved, each step measured, deliberate. No one rushed to say more. There was no need. This moment was hers, a silent farewell and a quiet reclaiming of dignity. Outside, The afternoon sun streamed through the tall windows, casting long, golden shadows across the pavement. The world beyond the gym was vast and waiting, filled with possibilities both daunting and hopeful. Riley paused just before stepping out, the weight of years pressing down, but somehow lighter now. She inhaled deeply, the air filling her lungs like a promise. For a brief moment, she allowed herself to feel the quiet strength pulsing beneath her skin, the strength forged in hardship, loss, and survival. She glanced back once, not out of hesitation, but out of respect for the journey she had traveled and the people who had finally begun to see her truth. Then, with a steady, sure breath, Riley stepped forward into the light. The fight wasn't over, not by a long shot. But for now, she had reclaimed something far more precious than victory or recognition: her dignity, her presence, her rightful place. And as she walked away, the janitor was no longer invisible. The fading evening light poured through the tall windows of Hollow Creek Combat Gym, casting long shadows across the worn mats and peeling posters that lined the walls. The day's energy had settled into a quiet calm, and Riley stood at the threshold, her silhouette framed by the golden glow of dusk. Outside, the distant hum of the city thrummed faintly, a reminder of the world beyond this place, vast and full of unknown possibilities. She reached slowly into the pocket of her worn jacket and pulled out a small, weathered dog tag. The metal was scratched and dulled by years of use, but the engraving remained legible: David Kinross, Captain, U.S. Navy. Her fingers traced the familiar letters with a reverence born of memory and loss. A quiet ache blossomed in her chest, mingling with a swell of pride. A flash of a voice whispered in her mind. Her father's voice, steady and firm, promising strength in the face of darkness. That voice had guided her through the loneliest nights, the most grueling battles, both external and within herself. Riley allowed herself a soft smile, the first real one in a long time. She was no longer the girl who had hidden behind a mop and janitor's uniform, unseen and unheard. She was a warrior, quiet, unassuming, but unbreakable. The legacy she carried was not a burden but a source of strength, a silent fire burning beneath her skin. Her eyes scanned the gym one last time, the cracked mirrors reflecting years of struggle and perseverance, the faded photos of fighters past, the corners where stories had been written in sweat and determination. Every inch held a piece of her journey, a testament to battles fought and the resilience that had seen her through. The door creaked softly as she pushed it open and stepped into the cool night air. The world outside was cloaked in shadows, but Riley moved forward with steady purpose, the night wrapping around her like a protective cloak. Ahead lay uncertainty. The path was uncharted, the future unwritten. But for the first time in years, there was freedom, freedom to live on her own terms, free from the shadows of judgment, free from the weight of expectations. Some battles are fought in silence, far from the spotlight and applause. Some victories don't need crowds or cheers, only the quiet acknowledgement of self and the dignity reclaimed. Riley Kinross walked forward into the night, invisible no more. Her story, once hidden in whispers and shadows, had finally been told. And in that telling, she was found. Thank you for following this story. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe and share your thoughts below. Where are you watching from? Let us know in the comments. Stay tuned for more immersive tactical stories.